You're listening to the G&D show with Govinda and Dan of City of Bristol College. If you've got any comments or questions for us to read out on the show, then email us at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Again, that's thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Let's get on with the show.
Hello everyone, you are listening to the G&D show with Dan, and unfortunately, Govinda is not well. He's not with us today. He's at home. Obviously, Gigi, we hope you recover quickly. He has indeed got COVID. He got positive results back from a PCR test, which are like the official ones. So sadly, Gigi is not with us today. He couldn't make it. But of course, we wish him a speedy recovery, and we hope that he can get back to work soon. So it's just me. And honestly, I'm nervous as hell because I have no idea how I'm going to get on with this by myself. But I've done a lot of talking in my time. You guys probably already know, the regular listeners to this podcast know that I talk a lot. I say a lot of things. So I might be all right by myself. But I'm still going to be careful with how I structure this and how I go about it. Because what I don't want to do is waffle. What I don't want to do is take up too much time or too little time. And, lose you guys. So let's see how we go. So first of all, today's session, this conversation is around a topic that really leans into what's going to be happening in the next term, right? We're going into exam term. We're going into the kind of final term, the end of the year, of which it's been an interesting year. For some of you guys, it's been heavily uneventful. For some of you, it's been incredibly eventful. But it's been a challenge nonetheless, of course. But what I wanted to go into, and hopefully we could do this again when Gigi's back, but what I wanted to go into was actually talking about English, the language, and language in general. I can't speak about different languages, but I might allude to it a little bit. But language in general, because I'll be really honest with everyone out there. I did all right with English language in school. English literature I didn't do well in secondary school until I got to college. And if it hadn't been for this teacher I had in college, I would still be off the fence when it came to language. I'd still hate English. I'd still think Shakespeare was a waste of time. Chaucer, none of it. I would have been like, nah, forget about it. Boo, Canterbury Tales. I don't care. But it was because of this teacher. And this teacher opened up something in me that made me go, no, language is fascinating. It really is a fascinating thing. It's psychological, it's philosophical, it's obviously sociological. There's so much about it that is underrated. And I think we do take it for granted, actually. We take it for granted so badly. Because if we get to understand and break down language, then we are building a skill of thinking that is currently, honestly, heavily, heavily underrated. The critical thinking skills, analytical skills. I'm trying to think of other things off the top of my head. It's just, there are genuinely incredible thinking skills, neurological skills that we develop when we break down language. And I hope to go into some of that today. So I'm going to give a couple of different quotes here to hopefully start, shining a light on what I'm talking about. So the first one is from someone called Federico Fellini. And they said, a different language is a different vision of life. And I think at first port of call, I want to go straight into the other languages that I kind of can speak, but not really. I'm not really that good at speaking other languages. But obviously, we take for granted that, for example, we're speaking English. I'm speaking English. Now, some of you may be listening to this, and some of you may be thinking, well, English is my second language. So you may already be on board with what I'm saying. However, I've got to point out that English is a very common language. Not the most common language, but it's very common. So I don't know whether people out there who speak English as a second language kind of take it for granted and just be like, yeah, English exists. It's just another language that we speak. Because when you speak English as your native language and then you learn another one, it feels different because it's not as required or desired or necessary, which is a privilege without question, right? We don't need to learn French or German or Chinese or Japanese or Swahili. We don't need to learn any of that. It's a luxury for us, which I think speaks volumes of itself. But it wasn't until I started to learn Polish a little bit that I started to get into a place of how we saw things and our connection with language to things, right? And how intrinsic it was. I don't know why, but bench keeps coming into my head because I love that word in Polish, and I just want to make sure that's correct actually, because I think it is. But I believe the word is ławka for bench in Polish. It's ławka, which again, if you're hearing this for the first time, you're like, what is that? That's bench, and there's an alien sensation about it because it feels so disconnected. But of course, the more you say it, the more I just associate that with bench as well, and it becomes a secondary thing. My timer's gone off. I've already spoken longer than I needed to. But then when I think about speaking Polish, so I say dzień dobry, jak się masz, dobrze dzięki, all of the little things about a kind of regular conversation, I start to, and certainly when I use the tonality and the accent and so on and so forth, I'm actually starting to awaken to a different way that my mouth even moves. I've not used my mouth, ever in my life have I used my mouth to speak in the way that it is required to speak in Polish. And so it opens up a whole new realm of genuinely existing, and it feels like yourself are changing as a whole human being because of the way that your mouth now moves, the way your tongue rolls, the way your lips and your mouth and everything has to move around it. Literally, it changes the way you view life. And I think that's something that opens up a perspective of the world that if you don't ever open into, can really shut off perspective in so many different ways. And that's simply from beginning to learn a different language. I was learning so much, and I could start throwing out Polish words, but it would mean nothing to anyone. So there's no point in me doing that. But I genuinely felt like I was moving into a whole different perspective of the world when I started to learn a new language because of the way that different things would be referred to. And I think that's something that, when this quote comes out, really stands out to me as well. I think also, the other thing of it is looking at music. And I'm going to go into this in more detail in the next part. But certainly when we look at musical lyrics and in the way that young people create language, and we have done for so long, also speaks volumes into the fact that a different language truly is a different vision of life. So I'm going to pause here and we'll go into that next section in a second. You're listening to the G&D show with Gigi and Dan. If you feel like you could do with some support with catching up on your English and maths from last year, or your studies or assignments from last year, and you really, really want to be able to get those things done, then reach out to us at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Again, that's thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. And we will, of course, get in touch with you and we'll start organising some one-to-one conversations, because we do believe that this can work. You can get this stuff done, but you've got to get in touch with us quick time. All right, get in touch with us right now and we'll help you catch up from last year. Let's get back to the show. All right, so into the meat and veg of this. I don't know if that's appropriate. I don't know if I wanted to say that. It's been said. We're done. So into the meat and veg of this. I'll say it again. My God, Dan, shut up. And actually, I'm going to use one of the most famous quotes in, I guess, literature. One of the most famous quotes in literature that goes back to time and time again. But I also want to use different quotes that we can look at to establish how language really can be explored, to open our minds up to different ways of seeing things, different perspectives, and help us fall in love with it. Now, I say I love English language. I love language. Not necessarily English language, but language in general. I love the way it changes. I love the evolution of it. I love the way that it can even be bastardized, and in the way that it can be twisted into something else, even for bad, because it shows the diversity and complexity and malleability of language. So I want to kind of go into the whole thing, and hopefully what I hope at the end of this episode is you, the listener, come to a new place where you're like, at least a little bit like, oh, actually, this is kind of interesting, right? Because first of all, the memes that I've seen out there, and obviously they're of young people nowadays. I don't know, I haven't seen them as much anymore, but I know they still do the rounds of people taking the mick out of English teachers, where, the writer says the water was blue, and they're taking the mick thinking like the teacher's trying to explore it and go into it and be all deep about it, when in fact all the writer was saying was that the water was blue. I get that. But actually, unfortunately, that is kind of anti-intellectual, because it pushes against the very beauty and magnificence of language and what language can transcend into how we perceive our reality, how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive our life, opportunities we can get in our life, etc., etc., etc. So while it can be a joke, yes, and it is funny, I have to admit, it's also something that we do want to take seriously, because to be able to investigate what people can mean, reading between the lines and so on and so forth, and I actually will go into a little bit I do with students when I run workshops on this, we really start to open up in terms of our ability to think beyond the boundaries of rigidity, of siloedness. We actually feel, less isolated from it. So the quote is from Hamlet by Shakespeare, and you probably already know where I'm going with this. It is, "To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against the sea of troubles, and by opposing end them." Now, at the base level, let's go through this in levels. At the base level, to be or not to be, I don't know how many of you will see straight away the very clear question of existence. Is it worth living or not? Is it worth being or not being? Should I or shouldn't I? Now that opens up, like, simple. So how many words is that? 1, 2, 6. 6 words. 6 words brings into question the entire value of existence itself. Should we live? Is it worth living? And I'll just quickly call out anyone who's getting distracted by my questions going, no, lol, stop it, come back to me, all right? Stay in the room, we're here now, okay? So to be or not to be, 6 simple words. In fact, I mean, wow, 6 words, one of which is 3 letters, the other are 2. And this one, 13 letters, 6 words, bringing into question the worthiness, the value of existence itself. This is a big conversation for me anyway, but this is kind of what that stems from. Is it worth living? And of course, that is the question. What is the point? What is the purpose? Why are we here? That is the question. That's been the ongoing philosophical question, and some people have brought a conclusion to it, some people haven't. But here we are. That is the constant question. What is the purpose? And I don't want to go into it. I could get excited and get sidetracked and start telling you about, what I think purpose is. And I think the reason for us to exist is, but no, that's not the point of us being here today. But that opens up a conversation itself. 13 letters, 6 words. Is it worth existing? What's the point of us being here? Why are we here? Right? Is it nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune? Should we live through the pain? Is it worth living through the pain of people attacking us for being wealthy? That's one place. Is it worth it? And actually, you can, of course, then explore that conversation around wealth, around fame, around popularity. Is it worth it? Because some people say no. Some people have said no. When we look at, unfortunately, the cases of suicide amongst, Hollywood's best, Hollywood's finest, we can see that for some people, no, it's not. It's not worth it. And actually, I should say worth it. They've actually used the term nobler. Is it nobler in the mind? Is it a noble thing to stand strong against the slings and arrows? Sling is, for those of you who don't know, a weapon wherein you could put... Well, oh God, actually, hang on. What were those things used? Dennis the Menace had one. Oh, what was it called? It was a sling, effectively. Obviously, you can see, when people break their arm, they put their arm in a sling. But people can also put, like, rocks in it, like David against Goliath. And they can swing it around and fling it, and it can obviously set a trajectory. You think of, like, lacrosse, but with a napkin instead. That's how I'm going to describe it. Is it nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune? Is it worth me standing here with my riches, with my wealth, but take the attacks of other people? I wish that I remembered enough about Hamlet to be able to put this into context. But if you're studying Hamlet right now, or of course, if you've got English lessons, you can ask your English teacher and get them to look it up, or you can Google it right now and go, wait, what's going on here? I don't know the full picture, but that helps my case here. That actually helps me discuss this, because what I'm able to do is I can put this sentence out of context in and of itself and go, right, what is this sentence alone saying, right? Or take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. Or do I stand up against a sea of troubles? So that doesn't really say that this is, a small feat. This is not a small thing he's talking about. The sea's big. There's a lot of it. I believe it's 3/4 of 2/3 of the earth. Is ocean, is water. That's a lot of water. You don't just take that on. That's no small thing. That's a big deal, right? But do I stand up? And it's almost impossible, actually. That's what he's suggesting. It's almost impossible. But at the same time, if he opposes them, he could possibly end it. By standing up against it, he could end it, even though it's deemed impossible. So now you're looking at a different area of a conversation wherein it might seem as though our troubles are worldly, are massive, are impossible, are grand beyond our own capabilities. But still, and by opposing, end them. That doesn't mean it's not impossible. It is possible to take them on. There is a chance that I can handle this. There is a chance that I could deal with this. But is it nobler to stand against them than to simply suffer the slings and arrows? I mean, perhaps actually what he's saying, considering now, to go back through it, so to be or not to be, he's questioning whether it's worth to live or die. He would not survive the slings and arrows. He's saying, should I die? Should I take it? And die and be dead? Should I die by the hands of these people? Or, in fact, the slings and arrows, he could be talking about ending his own life as well, because he's suffering this sea of troubles. He's having to deal with these. Should he drown in the sea of troubles, which he there identifies as slings and arrows? Or should he stand up against the slings and arrows, which are perceived as a sea of troubles, an impossible feat, and try and stop them? And again, he does. In fact, the thing is, he doesn't. There's no suggestion of attempt or try here in this sentence. It's very much, if I stand up against this, I will end them, even though it's a large problem. I will end them. And that also brings into question an interesting point of, you could argue, a willing, a sense of self-confidence, a self-affirmation to go, if I did go up against this, I could defeat it. Because there's no question here about whether or not Hamlet could end these sea of troubles. So here we go. To be or not to be, that's the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. He is quite... It almost sounds like this guy is on the precipice, idealizing suicide. He's talking about ending his life or allowing his life to end, right? And bringing into question all of the challenges that he faces, perhaps psychologically, maybe even in his real social life, even though he has all this money and fortune, right? Outrageous fortune. Not even just fortune, outrageous fortune. So much wealth, so much power, so much fame and popularity, right? Almost uncontrollable. Bear in mind, outrageous, suggesting that it brings rage to people how much fortune this man has. But he's hated so much for it, and the sea of troubles that brings with it. He's suffering psychological challenge. He is talking about the very same thing that these Hollywood champions are suffering or have suffered, which has led them to end their life. So now suddenly, Hamlet, in this, well, Shakespeare, because Hamlet didn't say it, Shakespeare said it, in this sentence is speaking to the existence of suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety amongst the wealthy, amongst the rich, amongst the powerful. And I can imagine that some of us might think and kind of despair, and not despair, dismiss it by going, well, they have money and fame and da-da-da. No, we're speaking about the fact that money and fame doesn't stop those things from happening. Money and fame does not prevent a person from experiencing psychological difficulty. It does not. Money is not the cure to mental health. It's not. And of course, I still shoe in here that yes, money can help if you spend it in the right places and you do the right things with it. But sometimes money doesn't actually buy you those things. It can get you access to certain things, but sometimes you don't need money for those things, right? Sometimes. But this whole statement, to be or not to be, invites the conversation around whether or not I mean, not many conversations, but one conversation about whether or not money actually buys you happiness. And of course, it doesn't have anything about necessarily money in there, because actually outrageous fortune doesn't necessarily have to be monetary value. Fortune could be good luck. And here we go. We could go into another area of this. Fortune doesn't even mean money specifically. It could mean good luck, good fortune. That's good luck. Right? Maybe Hamlet, and I'm deliberately doing this because I genuinely don't know. I know Hamlet is around kings and so on, but I don't actually know the full story, so literally hold on. But fortune could also mean good relationships, which I don't think is the case with Hamlet. I don't think it is at all, actually. It could mean that, though. So is this person hated because of the good relationships they have? So now you get into another conversation around whether or not a person should stand up against the pain that they get externally or internally, be it guilt for having good fortune, be it a bit of, guilt, I suppose, because other people don't have it. And that's true. There is such a thing as survivor's guilt. And it can be it's a real case in which if a person succeeds in a scenario where the odds were stacked against them, then that can actually have an impact on their psyche. And they can think to themselves, I shouldn't have survived this. I shouldn't have made it through this. Other people have either failed or not succeeded or not got a fortune or died from the experience that I've had. I should not have survived this. And that is actually a survivor's guilt that genuinely exists in people. That's a real thing. And that could be another thing that Hamlet's experiencing here, right? The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, a sea of troubles. How dare I be the one who has fortune? That's not fair when all these other people don't. All of this, how long have I spoken for? Good Lord. Nearly 15 minutes off of one quote. This is why I shouldn't be a teacher, because I'd never make it through a book. I would never make it through a book. I couldn't do it. But this is the powerful thing about language, is that in a sentence, so much can be said. So much can be said. And this is also important because in few words you can say so much. In few words you can say so much. And this is what's used in so many social movements, in political campaigns, all sorts. And you can see how the impact it can have. For example, and I'll say this openly, one of the biggest slogans in America during Trump's campaign was "Make America Great Again." 4 words. Make America Great Again. 4 words. Nice and easy. I did have to count. Yeah. Very straightforward. Very, very straight. 4 simple words. That's it. But the emotions that evokes, and the thoughts and the ideologies and the stories, the history, the possibility, the future that brings and that promotes. And it doesn't promote just one picture. That's the thing. It doesn't. It doesn't say one thing. It says multiple things. And you can go, I won't go into it, but you can go into an entire history of America off of 4 words. Off of 4 words. Right? And you could do the same with Black Lives Matter, Me Too, Britain First. All of these things, they're very small, quick slogans that fire out, right? And even a present one, Kill the Bill, right? And I'm not falling on any side in any of these things deliberately, because what I think is important for us to do is to be able to hear these slogans and look into them a little bit deeper, because we can say so much with very, very little. And the problem is, I mean, that's good that we can do that, but also the problem is that we also want to watch when we're falling too much on one side of what we hear, right? We want to understand what these things can mean outside of the context of our own perspective. And that's what language and English literature can help us do. It can help us see a genuine, bigger picture of things as they stand. And this can obviously help us in interpersonal relationships. We'll move away from the social movements and the political stuff. Let's go into interpersonal relationships, right? If someone came to you and told you like, I'm vexed. This person made me vexed, right? Right, we can obviously denote from that immediately that someone's upset. The person in front of us is upset about something, right? And it can trigger off many different things about our relationship with that person. Are we then going, and it asks us in terms of their body language, in terms of how they say it, in terms of exactly the words they use. I've used that sentence, and you may have already pictured, and this is again powerful stuff about language. I've said, this person's made me vexed. I'm vexed. You have, without realizing it in your own mind, created a human being out of that sentence that I've used in your head, right? And that's not necessarily anything too spectacular, but literally through using language. Because if I said instead, oh, I'm really upset, and I said it like that, would it be the same person? Have you created the same human being? Of course not. But this is the power of language. I can literally use language to promote thoughts in your head and help you create different ideas of the picture that's being painted, right? Let me do it again. What else? How else can I put it? Wait, I'm just trying to think now. Did I fire a different one out my head? If I were to say something's actually just happened that's really upset me, right? Now I just said that in my own regular voice, so you're probably just picturing me if you don't know what I look like. But nonetheless, you still put a face to the voice, you put a face to the language, you put a face to the accent, etc., etc., etc. So actually, you can start to address this in how you hear and understand different people's language. So what I'm actually going to do as well is go into this part, because this is another part of language that's really important for us to address and pay attention to. All right, is how language evolves. I don't feel that it's necessary for us to hold on to language too tightly, because language has indeed changed, whether we've liked it or not. I know when I was working I am working in colleges. What am I talking about? When I started working in colleges, there was a learning curve in how I would go about understanding, young people's vernacular, because I didn't get it. I'm an old guy. I don't know what the hell people are saying, but I had to learn it. Urban Dictionary, shout out to, I had to learn this. What do you mean when you say that? What do you mean when you say that? Because as young people grow up, they will use new language, and particularly AAVE and BVE, which is BBVE, so Black British Vernacular English and African American Vernacular English. A lot of the language that we see coming into young people's language actually comes from Black British and African American Vernacular English. So effectively, to break it down, you could argue it's Black slang, but actually that's more recently becoming synonymous with, you could argue, working class slang. So language that's used by a particular group of people. And also you can then look at the way that language is demonized. And interestingly enough, when people use certain language, it actually also, without us realizing it, can incite certain biases in our mind. Now, I'm not going to go down that road too far, but actually you want to ask the question, why do people create new languages? Why does language exist? Why would young people need to use certain language, right? I'm going to say very, very tongue-in-cheek right now, because this made me laugh. There was a time, if we remember Lil Jon made the song Yeah, and I'm not even gonna do it right here. But the lyrics are from the windows to the walls, right? And I'm not gonna say the next line because it's got profanity in it. I can't say the profanity. What's your profanity? I can't do it. But interesting enough, there was language in that song that was actually inappropriate for young people to hear. Right? There was language in that song that initially, when it came out, was inappropriate for young people to hear. But general society did not know this. They did not know this. So radio shows, daytime TV, it was being played at kids' parties all over the place. But the language in the song was highly inappropriate. But people didn't realize. People had no idea. This is the same for Superman by Soulja Boy. The Superman song, Soulja Boy, is an incredibly inappropriate song. It's a terrible, terrible song about doing some really inappropriate things. But we didn't know that. So again, we're playing it on news, we're playing it on TV, we're playing it all over the place. So why do people create new languages? For one, you could argue so many different things. You could argue, why would I need to use a language or use different words in front of certain people? What do I need to communicate to people that I do not want them to understand? And why do I not want them to understand it? What is that for? Language is so incredibly powerful. And of course, that's part of the reason why you want to maybe learn new languages, why you want to understand the broader understanding of language, why we can't hold on to our language too tightly, because it needs to evolve, it needs to change. I mean, I'll say this right now, for anyone who argues with this whole text speech and young people talk and all that stuff, bear in mind, when people would send telegrams back in the day, way back, I wasn't alive then, that was before my time, but people would send telegrams. That was pre-mobile phone text speak. People already communicated like that. Hello, what is Morse code? Stop it. Put it down. So, you know, when we use text speak, when we use certain language nowadays, it does evolve. And it's important for us to understand that. It's also, I think, there are only times where it's important for us to hold on to language where we see language literally being used, where a whole word is being forced to change for the sake of, a political ideology. I think that's where it can get dangerous, certainly. And I won't mention anything here. I think that's just where it gets a little bit silly, and we need to keep track of that, because that's done a lot of damage in the past and is doing a lot of damage today. But that is exactly why understanding language is so powerful. That is exactly what it is. I'm trying to think of examples again, where I'm trying to think of examples again. In fact, no. Okay, I'll end here because I've only got a couple of minutes left. And this is the big one for me that I think is what makes language so incredible, what makes language so powerful. And for one, I grew up listening to hip-hop music, and hip-hop music, again, I'd say if you think hip-hop music's all about violence and drugs and misogyny and so on, I apologize on behalf of the hip-hop community that that's what you've heard. I would understand why you'd feel that way, but I'd also say, unfortunately, you haven't heard the hip-hop that I've heard, which is poetic beyond belief. In fact, real hip-hop is an English literature teacher's dream come true. Seriously. Real, proper, grassroots hip-hop is an English literature teacher's absolute dream. It is the best thing that could happen to English literature. Without question. Without question. And you can fight me on it. Just fight me on it. Come on the show and fight me on it. Because you have got all of the language purposes, you've got all the language phrases, the rhyming schemes, you could argue this, hip-hop is probably what Shakespeare's based off of to some degree, or Shakespeare inspired hip-hop. The flow, the rhyming, the schemes, the use of wordplay, honestly, the breakdown of language completely. If you think that hip-hop is, a bad musical art form, I'm just going to argue that you haven't listened to the hip-hop I've listened to, and I'm sorry that that's happened to you, and I feel for you. I love many other different types of music, though, but I think that's what turned me on to different types of music, was understanding language to a different degree and diving into it. If you listen to drill music, I don't really listen to drill music. I'm not a drill fan, but when I do hear it, I'm literally hearing new language being birthed. Like, it's there. Like, I don't understand what I'm hearing, but I know that what I'm hearing, I can kind of denote and I can break down and understand, right? So I don't know exactly what it means, but I'm like, I think I can take a guess at what that means. But lyrics, again, you can hear a lot of songs in pop music that are about drugs, about sex, about violence, but they've got a happy little rhythm behind them, and they're all, upbeat and woo, yeah, let's all have a dance. But they're actually about some really heavy stuff. But that's what we understand when we listen to lyrics, when we listen to language. Language is so vitally important for us to dig into. And I think if we start to enjoy it in a far more holistic way, if we just sit into language, and I think one of the challenges with learning language, certainly learning English, is trying to learn it in a very rigid and processed and systematic way, takes away from the magic and the power of human language and what it can really do. I haven't even touched the surface, really, of how language has created so much of what we see today. Our language shapes our reality without question. It really, really does. But if we don't fall in love with that idea and that concept of how powerful language is, and if we don't even open up the door to recognizing that language has allowed and does so much for us on a day-to-day basis, And then we realized that if we got to understand it on a deeper level, how much more it could do for us. If we started to learn different languages, what that could do for us. I think that would be it. That would be the key, without question. It is insane, the way that we almost disrespect language. And I say we on a general term. We disrespect it by making it too rigid, by clutching our pearls too much to it. Right? By being hierarchical, by gatekeeping it, by being elitist about it. I think we ruin language that way. I think we ruin language and disrespect it by not embracing the fact that one word can mean two different things at all times. Context is key in language all the time. I think we disrespect language by not appreciating where the language source is, where the language came from. The origins of it, because that can obviously also give us some great insight into why that word existed in the first place and why it was necessary for that particular word, that particular term or phrase to exist in the first place. It can tell us about human existence. It can tell us about human history. It can tell us where we're going. It can tell us who we are. It can tell us what is possible for us. It can tell us everything about ourselves. Everything about ourselves. I'm going to end on this, though, because I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking, all right, I need to round up for sure. Definitely need to round up. But I'm going to end on this one and leave you with this thought, because there's one thing I want you to take away from this. If anything, I want you to take this away. And I want the adults to hear this as much as I want to hear the kids. And I think this is important for us to acknowledge right now when it comes to language. Language gives us permission. Language is a permission at all times. If we identify something as a chair and we see it as a chair, right, we're going to sit on it. And obviously that sounds stupid because it's like, Dan, if I see a chair, I don't need to call it a chair to sit on it. But the thing is, if we were raised to believe that a chair was actually a table and we continue to treat it as a table, it may not occur to us straight away to sit on it, right? But of course, we communicate with surfaces generally as seats until informed otherwise. So, for example, a table surface is a seat until we put a plate of food on it, and then it might not be a seat, right? Unless you're, wanting to make a TikTok video or something. But it might not be a seat all of a sudden. But this is what I mean. It gives us permission. And so, I don't know if that example lands, but I'll say it. I'll just get to the point. The way that we talk about other people, the way that we use language to refer to other people, is permission. It is permission we give ourselves to treat those people as we have described them. If we call someone an idiot, we have given ourselves permission to treat them like an idiot. And even if we don't intend that to happen, that's exactly what we've done. If we call someone a slur, any kind of slur, gender-based slur, sexuality slur, race-based slur, we are dehumanizing them. We're taking away their sense of humanity, and we are making them less than human, which in turn allows us and permits us and the people in the presence of said slur to treat them less than human. If we speak of people in any way, shape or form that is less than human, we are permitting ourselves and people in the proximity to treat them as less than human. We do this. And that is the power that language has. It's one of the greatest powers that language has. And unfortunately, one of the most evil powers that language has. Because it lets us do so much harm to others. And it so easily falls from our faces, from our heads, from our mouths. It falls out like water from a tap. The easiest thing in the world. So I want us to be more conscious at the very least of the language that we use. And remember that that is a reflection of who we are. Right? And if we have no other ways of using language, then that's okay. But that's why we read. That's why we learn. That's why if we're going to watch a YouTube video or we're going to listen to a podcast, let's listen to someone or watch someone who uses language that challenges us a little bit. Let's listen to people who use language in a more diverse way, who stretch the boundaries of language. It doesn't mean they have to have an accent. It doesn't mean they have to be posh or they have to be like, super smart supposedly or anything like that. Just because a person uses, let's say, street language doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. But allow their street language to be part of the diverse language that they use. Yeah? Allow their accent to be a reflection of where they've come from, not a reflection of their intelligence. I think it's really important that we address the way that we use language with each other. And if we can't find ways to talk about people in a nice way, or even in a more constructive way, if we want to criticize, then let's learn to do that. Let's learn to do that. Because as much as throwing vitriol around might make us feel good in the moment, the greater impact is that we make this world and we make this place, our own environment, an unsafe place for ourselves and for others in it. So I just want to leave you on that note. And I think on that note, actually, I think I can end this episode because I can't play Would You Rather by myself. I can't do it. It feels stupid. It feels trite. It's nonsense. So I'm just going to leave it there and let you sit in that. Thank you very much for listening. And what I'm going to just round off again by saying that myself and Gigi are here as catch-up coordinators to help you catch up on your studies. Okay, to get you caught up with last year so you don't have to repeat anything, or, you don't end up falling into a scenario you don't want to be in. And we do believe that you can do this in the term. You can catch up. It's perfectly possible. But maybe you just need a little bit of support, and that's what we're here for. So reach out to us at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. We will help you catch up with your studies and get you back on track, all right? Because COVID may have put things on pause, but you still have the rest of your life to get what you want out here, baby. So let's get them. Let's go get it. All right. Thank you very much for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next week where hopefully, fingers are crossed, hands are together, Gigi rejoins us. All right. Much love, people. Take it easy. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the G&D Show. Thank you very much. If you've got any comments or questions, or if you're a student at City of Bristol College and you want some one-to-one conversations with myself or Govinda, then please do email us at thegdshowbristol@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in another episode.